Welcome to the STAIR Traveller and Roma information session. We hope this session will provide an insight into the lives of Traveller and Roma students. First, we will talk about the STAIR name and logo and how they came about.
How the logo came about. It came from our weekly team meetings. We all agreed it had to be something visible to both the Roma and Traveller community. The wagon represents both Travellers and Roma. It represents the nomadic way of life and where we came from. The stars above the person's head are very important, as it was originally a graduation cap, but we decided to remove it because not everyone wants to go to college. We prefer the stars because everyone's goals are different. Everyone has different stars they aim for. The symbols and the letters also represent both communities. The road represents the journey the Travellers and Roma take and their journey through education. The wagon wheel and the Zion also represent both communities.
The Star Nitris project falls under the National Traveller and Roma Inclusion Strategy, or NITRIS, 2017 to 2021. This is a European-wide initiative. Within Ireland, the strategy takes a whole governmental approach to improving the lives of travellers and Roma in Ireland. The Star Nitris project falls under the education theme in the strategy. It's a 2-year pilot programme developed under the theme of education and improving the attendance, participation and retention of Traveller and Roma pupils. There are currently 4 pilot projects: North Dublin, Tuam, Wexford and Cork, all of which are staffed by homeschool community liaisons, educational welfare officers and education workers. The Star Nitris team covers 19 schools in our pilot. These schools are primary, post-primary and are mainly Déis. The schools cover the geographical area of Coolock, Ballymun and Finglas.
Meet the team. Education Support Worker, Kathleen Lawrence. Education Support Worker, Johnny McDonnell. Education Support Worker, Barry Martin. Homeschool Community Liaison, Lisa Kyle. Education Welfare Officer, Caroline Vicone.
Who are Travellers? Travellers are a minority ethnic group indigenous to the island of Ireland. Members of our community share a common ancestry, culture, history, traditions and a sense of belonging or peoplehood. It is important to note, however, that Travellers are not a homogeneous group and there is a lot of diversity within. Traveller ethnicity was formally recognised on the 1st of March 2017 by Taoiseach Enda Kenny on behalf of the Irish state.
According to Census Figures 2016, there are almost 31,000 travellers living in Ireland. However, according to the All-Ireland Traveller Health Study that was conducted in 2008 and published in 2010, there are over 36,000 travellers living in Ireland. The difference in statistics is not surprising when compared with the low level of trust that travellers have with those outside the community, due to fear of discrimination and expectation of lower level of service.
Who are Roma? Roma constitute the largest minority ethnic group in Europe. While it is widely acknowledged that Roma throughout Europe are dramatically undercounted or not counted at all in official data, it is estimated that there are 10 to 12 million Roma across Europe.
There's a lovely resource on YouTube for your students called Gypsies, Roma, Travellers, an Animated History.
Although Roma share a common lineage, their migrations over the centuries to many different countries have produced numerous distinct communities, as particular groups establish roots in various countries and regions. In Ireland, while estimates vary, most estimate a population of around 5,000 Roma people living in the state.
Traveller life expectancy. Here are two charts that show life expectancy in Ireland in 2016. On the left is traveller life expectancy, and on the right is life expectancy of the majority population. As you can see, travellers have a younger population, with the pyramid being very wide at the bottom but getting very narrow at the top, showing lower life expectancy. To put this into context, only 3% of travellers live over the age of 65, with only a small handful of travellers making it to 80. On the contrary, the majority population have a higher life expectancy, and the government are planning for people living longer in Ireland. You may also notice that the travel life expectancy only goes up to 80, while the life expectancy for the majority population was increased to 100. Mortality rate of traveller women. For every one settled woman that dies, 3 traveller women die. Infant mortality rate. For every 3 settled babies that die, 14 traveller babies die. Infant mortality is inclusive of miscarriage up to 1 year old. For women around the world, miscarriage rates in general are 1 in 4. For traveller women, it is 3 in 4. Traveller deaths. If all things had been equal in Ireland in 2008, traveller death rates would have been 54. Instead, there were 188 observed deaths, which meant there were 134 excess deaths that year.
My name is Thomas McCann. I'm the manager of the Travel Counselling Service, which is a counselling service specifically for travellers. My brothers and other extended family members, and indeed other members of the travel community who I know very well, who went through the schooling system, their experience wasn't great. I mean, there was a number of things that stood out for me, and even as a community worker in the 80s, trying to address it in some areas, such as the lack of homework that travellers got. I mean, the lack of support that the families got. I mean, the history that we're coming out of in terms of the travel community in Ireland and education is one where travellers was taken into schools, including myself, excess schools, and there was very low expectations about what travellers would go on to be or achieve. So there was, and also your identity wasn't valued. Now I'm talking, in general, but I'll hopefully try and bring it up to where we are now, where travellers was kind of encouraged to hide their identity, and there was, I think, as a result, I think a lot of travellers who grew up developed shame, because as a child you don't know how to deal with them feelings that's coming up, and you're certainly not in a position to challenge them. A lot of the time, that even the teachers, it was quite biased, because not only did they not know, but they didn't really, there was no effort on a lot of schools to find out about traveller culture or identity, and kind of, or in the curriculum. I mean, there was no talk about traveller culture, and if there was talk, it was, a lot of the time it was in a derogatory sense. For children going through the school system, it shapes their, their expectations for themselves, their self-image, their kind of self-esteem, their confidence, and that can really impact on what to do later on in life. In terms of, settled people understanding travellers, the wider settled community. I mean, one of the places that we try and create that understanding is in the classroom, towards any kind of thing, whether it's environment, whether it's, culture, whether it's, industry. And yet, travellers are invisible, and remain invisible in the system, and remain invisible in Ireland. I mean, and their contribution remains invisible. Whether in a lot of fields, I mean, travellers have made a major contribution. One of the areas, say for instance, my own family would have contributed to would be music, for instance. You know, my extended family would have been musicians. People like Paddy is a first cousin of mine, is you know, a talented piper. But many others as well. If you take Margaret Barry, if you take Pecker Don, if you take Finbar Fury, if you take, you know, there's a whole list of people. Likewise in sports, if you look at the sports, particularly in certain sports, if you look at the boxing, if you look at people like Francie Barrett, if you look at others who represented Ireland, who carried the flag for Ireland in the Olympics, and yet when Francie came back, and Francie, you know, told his story, he was refused access to a club in Galway, and it reminded me actually. Francie's story reminded me very much of Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali fought in the Olympics and he won a medal, and he went to a diner and he talked about this story, and they wouldn't serve him in the diner because he was black, you know, and he threw away the medal, and he talked about that story in the past. But, you know, so Travellers, but it's not seen, it's a lot of the time, it's not, maybe it's seen but it's not valued. You know, the contribution a lot of the time is not valued. It's and I think we need to look at, you know, particularly how we build the confidence and pride, you know, in children and in young people going through the school system. Because if it's knocked out of you in school and gone through the school system, it's very hard to develop that at a later stage. And I think, you know, Travellers are very resilient and have, you know, we've managed to kind of adapt and survive, I suppose. And, you know, and I think, you know, it's against all the odds, I think, that a lot of families and individual travellers has done that. And I think the extended family has been a big part of that, of the community. You know, that there was others around us where we could retreat to a safe space, you know, where we could be ourselves and we weren't judged negatively and we were supported. You know, and I think we need to create that environment in the schools for all children. I think otherwise, you know, not only are we letting down children, whether it's travellers or settled children indeed, but we're setting them up to fail in life. We're setting them up to kind of, you know, to feel negative towards themselves and indeed maybe towards their community as well. You know, in many cases, you know, that shame, internalized shame that happens in many children. And I think, like, if you look at the living conditions that children are, a lot of traveller children are living in, I mean, you know, a lot of the living conditions are really bad. That many children are coming out and parents are struggling in very poor conditions, sometimes without basic facilities, to get their children to school, you know, and then to face that challenge in school, you know, where the children are coming home having really negative experiences. You can see why, as children get older, that they drop out. They don't, I mean, you know, because to tolerate that is very, very difficult, you know, and you wouldn't expect anyone to do that. So I think it's really important that we begin to look at that and build them, build the confidence of young travellers and kind of create safe spaces in the school. I think it's about people feeling, travellers or anyone else, feeling that they can be totally themselves and not be on guard that somebody is going to say something or do something to knock them back. Because when they let down their guard, that's when sometimes they're knocked back, and so that guard, people are on, you know, they're on alert all the time then, and they're anxious. That creates an anxiety. I mean, from a mental health perspective and as a counsellor, you see that in people. You see, you know, that it creates an anxiety in people, that they can't be themselves, they can't relax. You know, we need change. We need to move on from this. We need to ask the question, how do we, as a society, you know, both as travellers and settled and other groups, how do we make this the best place? Make this a safe space that builds their confidence, that, you know, that supports their expectations to reach as high as they can reach, and to reach their full potential. If we don't do that, we're only setting children up for failure. And again, I think that's, you know, we have to get beyond that if we're going to, you know, have a society that enriches people's lives and that supports us to live, you know, a full and healthy life that reaches our full potential. You know, I think that's absolutely crucial.
Behaviour and attitude survey. According to the Behaviour and Attitude Survey in 2017, 83% of people in the general population would not employ a traveller. 85% would not have a traveller as a friend. 78% would not have a traveller as a neighbour. 65% said they would avoid traveller completely. 91% would not have a traveller as a family member.
In 2019, last year, I attended second year of secondary school. I had a substitute PE teacher throughout the year. Everybody liked the teacher and everybody had good time for him. One day before Christmas, some of the settled girls were still getting changed, while me and two other traveller girls were in the PE hall. We were sitting in the PE hall waiting for everyone else to come out, and he walked in and said, "Hello, girls." And we said, "You don't say hello anymore, you say, what's the crack?" And he turned around and said to us, "What do you want me to do? Speak like a knacker all day, every day?" When the teacher said that, one of the girls said, "Oh, so is that what you class us as?" And he said, "No, I don't mean it like that." And she said, "Well, any traveller person would take it as the way you've said it now." Another teacher found out about it. Like, we told, and he just said that it's not, he didn't mean it like that, he's from Cork, and they were making up excuses, kind of. But, like, it wasn't something to make an excuse of. I never thought he would say anything like it, the way he did. And it was never kind of the same after. Like, he said that no class was the same with him. I told my mummy about it, and when he was confronted, his attitude towards me completely changed. He'd never say hello or anything on the corridors no more. He changed over something, it was his fault. Like, it wasn't my fault that he done this. So I believe that he only said sorry because the teachers and stuff were asking him, the principal and things, were telling him to say sorry.
So my daughter came home from school, and she was home from school, but it was actually in the evening time when she decided to come downstairs and say to me, "Oh, Mum, by the way, this teacher in school said to me today, what do you want me to do? Speak like a knacker all day." Now, at the time, I was absolutely flabbergasted. I just didn't know what way to look. I really wanted, being honest with you, I really wanted to go around to the school, but it was closed, and it happened to be Friday, so I couldn't go to the school. So Monday morning came, I went around to the school. Now, mind you, I'd been stewing all week, a weekend, to wonder what way I was going to sort this or deal with this. But anyway, so I decided I went on the Monday morning with my daughter, and I asked to see the principal. At the time, the principal was busy. There was interviews or something happening. So I explained to the secretary, who I'd known years in the school, because all of my kids have attended the same school. And she too was shocked. So she said she would get the principal to arrange a time, which she did, I think, for the Wednesday. So again, on the Wednesday morning, I went around and explained my story and how I felt, having my daughter come home from school and having to tell me this, especially from a teacher that she had, that when both my son and her would come home from school, they would always say, "Oh, he was a good teacher, he's great, he's this, he's great crack, he's," the respect I had from, I suppose, towards a lot of the other teachers was much different. They get along with him, they consider him a friend as well as a teacher. So of course, again, I explained my story to them. I said, "Look, this is not on in this day and age. If it was any other ethnic minority, we would not be looking at something like this. We'd be looking at a national newspaper being pulled into the schools or whatever." And again, the principal, in all fairness, it wasn't her. She was very apologetic and said it shouldn't have happened, and would I be willing to meet with the teacher, and for his explanation. So anyways, we met with the teacher. I think it was the next day we went with the teacher, and I have to say, when I went into the room and the principal and the teacher was present, who actually had said the remark to my daughter, I looked at him and he looked like a scared schoolboy who'd done something wrong. And I suppose for me, my motherly instinct kicked in. I have two older boys who are working, and I thought, you know, sometimes they're young, stupid, can say things. Maybe that's the context he said it in. And, you know, he spoke and he said he was very apologetic and that he didn't mean it in the context that it came out in, and that he was, you know, it was slang where he was from. So he said that it wasn't meant in the way that it was spoken, and that he was very apologetic to me and my daughter. Um, and I gave him the benefit of the doubt, you know, he was a young teacher. I did say, went through all the, you know, that this day and age, and if it was any other ethnic minority within the school, there would be outcry within both, and I could, if I wanted to, go to the Department of Education, but I chose not to. And then I left it at that. But there's times there when I think, now when I look back and think, that I shouldn't have left it the way I left it. I should have gone further about it, not to destroy the young man's career or anything like that, but to actually highlight that this is something that's still happening to travellers in this day and age. And in that context, I suppose what I mean by that is that the hidden racism that our kids have to face on a daily basis within the schools is much more damaging than that remark that that teacher, who was young, and we'll give him the benefit of the doubt, you know, he actually said it, maybe not as he meant it, but he said it. He said that out, whereas we've got the hidden racism from teachers that are too clever to be caught out.
Discrimination has been identified as a key issue for Roma in Ireland. Roma reported being discriminated against at both an institutional and individual level. 93.3% of Roma reported feeling discriminated against in access and accommodation. In some cases, Roma stated that landlords said that they did not accept Roma tenants. 78.9% of Roma reported feeling discriminated against in getting a job. Roma reported hiding their identity to ensure this did not happen. For many, hiding their Roma identity was the only option to secure work. 81.1% reported having experienced discrimination in a street or public setting. For many, this was experienced through verbal abuse and racist taunts, including being shouted at and told to go back to your own country. The majority of respondents in the current study are living in fear of discrimination. This is extremely stressful and borne out by reports of poor mental health.
How to respond if someone tells you they've experienced racism and discrimination. What not to do. Don't say the person who said it is a good person. There is no one disputing that the person who said it is a good person or a bad person. We understand they may be your friend or someone that you know, but what they've said or done is wrong and we must acknowledge it. Don't tell the person that they must have picked it up wrong. This can make someone feel like they're not being heard or acknowledged, and it can make them feel like their feelings are not being acknowledged. Don't say they didn't mean it like that, it's just a word they use. Again, this makes the person who has experienced the racism or discrimination feel like that they have done something wrong and they've picked it up wrong, and this is not okay. Here's what you can do. Ask the person how they're feeling. Are you okay? This is really important and can make someone feel like they're not alone. Is there anything I can do to support you? This is a practical situation and you might be able to help them report the situation or find a solution for them. Most of all, it's really important to say that I'm sorry that this happened to you. This recognises that the person has experienced racism or discrimination and that they are not alone.
what people cannot see are the many Roma who are contributing to the Irish society, and those people are invisible. And also they want to be invisible because they see how bad other people that they are treated. And it's normal as human being to protect yourself, to protect your family. I have a friend of mine who her child was asking the mother not to collect them from school just because they say then other children they are going to bully me because they know we are Roma because they see you. What I ask the Roma community, I ask them to be proud of who they are, because hiding ourselves is not a solution. My name is GABI MUNTEAN. I work as a community worker in the Roma team here in Paddy Point. We are Traveller and Roma Centre. The situation of the Roma in Ireland, it's a very bad situation. The findings that we had in the needs assessment, we find very shocking findings, like overcrowding situation, a lot of people in one room together with children. They are not habitually resident, or they don't have even child benefit for children even if they are going to school. We need to ensure that people are not living without shelter and without food in Ireland. It's 2018 and we can see the situation when the snow was and all this bad situation was, how hard it is for people to be in the streets. We did an interview and we had Roma peer researchers that they were doing the interview. There was shocking findings. There was many times when I left there and I couldn't believe what I had once seen. I work in the sector. I know how the Roma are living, but I couldn't believe that it's so bad. Because sometimes I see people just in the street. I speak with women that they are begging outside. They told me how bad they are living, how bad it is for them, how hard it is for, to leave for what you beg and then to send the children to school, even if you have nothing to put on the table. There are few recommendations that we had in the report, and we hope that by doing that, we are going to achieve something. But it's not only hoping, because this is a humanitarian crisis, and people should see that we all have to come together and do something for people that they have nothing. My starting was from begging. So when I came to Ireland, I was begging, I was selling flowers. It was not an easy start, but also I was doing voluntary work for 7 years for my community. It doesn't mean that if you are begging at one point, in the next few years, you can be whatever you want. I'm doing better because I had an opportunity.
The habitual residence condition. The HRC is a condition that you must satisfy in order to be eligible for most means-tested social welfare payments in Ireland. To receive social welfare, you must prove that you have a proven close link to Ireland. Of the Roma respondents who applied for social protection, 48% were not successful. Of the 48%, the average number of years they had lived in Ireland was 8 years. In focus groups, lack of documentation was a key barrier to meeting the habitual residence condition, as some Roma cannot prove the length of time they have lived in Ireland or their connection with the state. Language and literacy issues are also a common problem. It is widely recognised that policies that may appear neutral can have a disproportionate and discriminatory impact on particular groups. Given the poverty and difficulties in accessing employment and supports outlined above, some Roma beg to survive. 17.6% of adults across households reported begging as their source of income, and 14% reported having no income.
The ethnic identifier is something you may have seen on different forms across many different services, including in the census. It is a universal question asked of everyone, not just minorities. We need ethnic data collection to identify discrimination, combat racism, and promote equality. Ethnic data would also enable us to monitor progress of policies and will provide strong evidence for further policy making. It is legal to collect ethnic data, but there is a clear requirement that all collecting must be done in the context of a strong human rights framework.
Education traveller statistics. Just 13% of travellers finish secondary school, compared with 92% of the general population. 7 out of 10 travellers live in a family home where the mother has no formal education or primary education only. 57% of traveller men were educated at most primary level, in sharp contrast to the general population of 13%. 62% of travellers felt they were discriminated against in school.
Respondents to the National Roma Needs Assessment viewed education as a positive opportunity for their children in Ireland. In over 70% of households, children attended primary and post-primary school. However, significant challenges and barriers were identified in the participation of Roma children in school. Up to 20% stated that they are experiencing poverty that would be considered extreme. Service providers reported families to be living without food, gas, electricity, and water. 25% of households reported that children have gone to school hungry, and 35% of households reported that children have gone to school without adequate school lunches. 57.5% reported not having enough money for books and school uniforms. Only 11.1% of Roma adults reported completing 12 or more years of education. The majority of adult Roma experiences in education were from education systems outside of Ireland. Language and literacy were identified by service providers as significant barriers preventing children from fully engaging with the curriculum and parents from participating and engaging with the school community.
Education success stories. The good news is more Irish travellers and Roma are taking their junior certificate, leaving certificate, and going into third level institutions and universities. Some travellers, like Dr. Rosaleen McDonnell and Dr. Cindy Joyce, have PhDs and teach in Irish universities. There are many young Roma role models currently attending third level institutions and universities in Ireland, like Bianca and Damaris, pictured below at primary school. Equality versus equity.
As part of the STARE programme, we work with 19 schools, most of whom are DEIS schools. We understand that children who are attending these schools are more likely to have some barriers when it comes to education. For example, coming from a socio-economic disadvantaged background. We also know that teachers and staff are quite often doing their best to provide a valuable education for all of their students, and some have said to us that they treat everyone the same. While the intention behind this is good, unfortunately treating everyone the same can do more harm than good. This is because not everyone is coming from the same place. Travellers and Roma face additional barriers when it comes to all areas of their lives, including their education. The image here shows the difference between equality and equity. On the left, there are 3 people, all of whom are given a box each, in order to reach the apples on the tree. As you can see, treating everyone equally has meant that only the tallest person can reach the apples. On the right, everyone is given a number of boxes depending on their need, And so, by treating someone with equity, we allow them the same opportunity and access to the apples.
Responding to Racism Guide. What can you do? Dig deeper. Look inside yourself for biases and stereotypes. Commit to disrupting hate and intolerance at home, at school, in the workplace, and in the community.
Recognizing your privilege and its meaning. Start your anti-racism work from the perspective of recognizing your own circumstances and privilege. This is key to understanding any role we can inadvertently play in reinforcing systematic racism. Explore and address prejudices. Be open to examining your unconscious prejudices and stereotypes you may have against the Roma and travelling community. Respond to racism in your community. When you witness racism, do something. In the face of hatred, apathy will be seen as acceptance by the perpetrator, the victim, and the public.
Start with yourself. Look at your own prejudices you may have. Make positive statements about others, challenging assumptions about people who are different. Keep persevering on behalf of other members of society who feel acutely threatened right now. Be an ally for people more vulnerable than yourself. Get active in your community and do something that makes you feel empowered. Responding to Racism Guide. Things you can do in class. Teach diversity. Prejudice is learned early, often at home. Schools and programs such as the Yellow Flag or Show Racism the Red Card Ireland can offer lessons, activities and programs focused on anti-racism, interculturalism and social inclusion. You can host a diversity and inclusion day on campus or reach out to young people who may be susceptible to hate groups, propaganda and prejudice. Things you can do in class. Examine your students' textbooks and the curricula at your school to determine whether they are equitable and intercultural. Introduce your students to intercultural experiences by intentionally expanding their experiences. Encourage your students to become activists. They can form harmony clubs, build multicultural peace gardens, sponsor Walk in My Shoe activities, and create ways to interact with children from other cultures. Examine the media your students consume, from internet sites to the commercials during their favourite TV shows. Stereotypes and examples of intolerance are bound to be present. Discuss these issues openly, as you would the dangers of cigarette smoking. Model inclusive language and behaviour. Children learn from the language you use and the attitudes you model. If you demonstrate a deep respect for other cultures, races and walks of life, they most likely will too. My Own Place, My Community, My Culture is a new junior cert short course developed by the Wexford Pilot. The course was written with Traveller and Roma students in mind, but can be adapted to suit students from any cultural background. The aim of this course is to empower students to recognise and appreciate ethnic diversity, develop intercultural awareness, be proud and knowledgeable of their own culture, have a positive impact on society, understand the power of education, and foster a sense of belonging in the school community.
I done my life travelling, and a happier time I've never had. It was the greatest in the world. You had everything: comfort, life and pleasure, and something to always do. You could get up in the morning in the tent and hear the blackbird and the thrush in the trees whistling. The young people will be ashamed of being a traveller in the future. However, no matter what you put on them, if it was silk, you still know them. It's hard to burn the wildness out of a wild bird's nose. You'll tame them for a while, but then they'll fly away again. My travelling days are over, and when I die, I will be with the most respectable in Ireland. I'll lie with them, and we'll all be the same. Yet people do not want to live beside each other in good health. I cannot understand it.